the voice in the rainforest knew things only dead people should know.
And the first time it called my name,
Yeah, it used my mother's voice.
even though she'd been dead for 12 years.
Right. And welcome to today's deep dive. Because today, we're really just tearing apart this whole myth of the untouched, peaceful wilderness.
Oh, absolutely. We are looking at an ecosystem that, it doesn't just hunt humans for meat or survival.
No, it hunts them for their memories. Which is, I mean, it's wild. So we are exploring this cinematic horror narrative called Echoes of the Canopy.
Specifically focusing on the terrifying legend at the absolute heart of it, which is the listener beneath the leaves.
Such a creepy title. And we're going to trace the psychological and physical descent of this guy, Dr. Eris Thorne, as he leads an expedition deep into the Hoh rainforest.
And we're really going to dissect the horrifying contrast, right, between his initial academic arrogance, like his firm belief that he can just outsmart a myth, and then the reality-shattering revelation of what this entity actually is.
Right, because to understand this narrative, I mean, we really need to focus heavily on the actual mechanics of the horror here.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, we need to analyze how this entity weaponizes human grief
Yeah.
to, harvest identity itself.
It's so insidious.
It really is. Yeah. So let's start with the man who thought he could just, explain away a literal nightmare. Dr. Eris Thorne.
Right.
He's a linguist. And I'm looking at his background in the source material, and I have to admit, I'm having a really hard time wrapping my head around why a linguist is the person leading this expedition.
It does seem counterintuitive, yeah.
Right. Like into a dangerous, uncharted section of a huge rainforest where people have recently just straight up vanished. I mean, why not a search and rescue team? Why a guy who, studies syntax?
Well, it's a vital question because it totally sets up the entire thematic architecture of the whole story.
Okay.
Eris is a man who vehemently hates myths. He operates on this strict belief that the supernatural just flat out does not exist.
Not even a little bit.
Not at all. To him, any supernatural occurrence, a ghost story, an ancient legend, or a mysterious disappearance, it's all simply a cultural misunderstanding.
Like people just getting confused.
Right, or a manifestation of primal fear, or just a linguistic anomaly that has been passed down and sort of distorted over the centuries. He really views language as the ultimate tool for structuring reality.
Okay, let's unpack this because language shaping reality that's a huge concept.
It is.
Are you saying that Eris believes that if we don't have the right words for something, it just seems like magic, but once we finally categorize it, the magic kind of dies?
Precisely. Yeah, think about the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis in linguistics,
Oh, right.
which suggests that the actual structure of a language determines a native speaker's perception and categorization of their experience.
So the words we use literally define the world we see.
Exactly. And Eris, well, he spent his entire life categorizing the unknown. So to him, a legend isn't a monster. It's just like a giant game of telephone that got way out of hand over a few hundred years.
Just people exaggerating.
Right. He thinks if he can map the phonetics, parse the syntax, and, track the words back to their origin, he's going to find a mundane truth. Chaos, basically just organized into grammar.
Right, okay. That makes sense. And that brings us to the inciting incident. Because he wouldn't just wander to the Hoh rainforest on a whim,
Oh, of course not.
There's a specific trigger. So 3 hikers vanished near the northern trails.
Yeah.
And the details of this are just so bizarre. There are no bodies, there's no blood, no signs of animal predation.
Nothing.
Literally no signs of a struggle whatsoever. Just these abandoned backpacks and these audio recordings left behind on their devices.
Yeah, and those recordings.
Recordings that terrified the local authorities so much that they cordoned off the entire region, which takes a lot for a place like that.
It really does. You have to consider the mindset of forest rangers and local authorities in an area like that.
Right, they see everything.
Exactly. These are people who are intimately familiar with the brutal, everyday realities of nature. They deal with lost hikers, hypothermia, bear attacks, you name it.
They're tough.
Right. They're completely desensitized to standard wilderness trauma, but they were absolutely not equipped to deal with what was on those tapes.
Because it wasn't normal.
No, it wasn't the sound of an animal attack. It was, impossible audio.
And I really want to pause on the tapes for a second because this is where Eris gets involved. And his reaction just really fascinates me.
It's so telling.
Right. He gets his hands on these recordings, and beneath the ambient static of the forest, he hears these perfectly accurate conversations.
Yeah.
But they're conversations spoken by dead relatives of the missing hikers.
Which is just chilling.
It's insane.
Yeah.
The narrative highlights this one heartbreaking moment where a local ranger is listening to a tape and this hardened outdoorsman just completely breaks down weeping.
Oh, yeah, that part is so tough.
Because cutting right through the static, he hears the voice of his own daughter, who had died years prior, whispering, quote, "Daddy, I'm cold."
Yeah, it completely subverts the natural order in a way that just breaks the human mind. I mean, the local tribes immediately start talking about the old legend, right? The listener beneath the leaves.
Right, this ancient thing under the canopy.
Exactly, an ancient thing that learns human voices.
But Eris, he doesn't react with terror. And this is honestly what I don't really buy about his character at first.
Really? How so?
Well, I mean, if I hear impossible audio of a dead child on a corrupted tape from a forest where people just vanish into thin air, I am running in the exact opposite direction.
Oh, 100%. Anyone would.
But Eris is drawn to it.
Hmm.
I look at him and I kind of think of how we all act when, say, the Wi-Fi goes down or our phone glitches out.
Right, okay.
Your first instinct isn't fear, it's just annoyance.
Yeah.
You assume there's a logical fix.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Like, to an IT person, a computer glitch is just bad code. You go in, you find the error in the script, and you debug it. And Eris views the supernatural exactly the same way.
He totally does.
He assumes there's just a logical, I don't know, a code to this acoustic anomaly.
Yeah.
He is completely unprepared for the possibility that the hardware itself, like the forest, is actually alive.
That analogy of the IT person and the bad code is just the perfect framework for understanding Eris's fatal flaw.
It really tracks with his ego, I think.
Absolutely. He truly believes he is dealing with a software issue, like a unique acoustic trick of the terrain, maybe an echo chamber effect, or even just an elaborate hoax.
Right, a prank.
Yeah, he assumes the environment is passive. A linguist believes that if you can parse the syntax, you essentially disarm the anomaly. He wants to label the phenomenon so it stops being a threat to his worldview.
He wants to turn the monster into just another data point.
Exactly. But this sets up the tragic irony that drives this entire narrative. Eris assumes language is just a human invention used to describe the world. He completely fails to realize that this entity uses language to consume the world.
Oh, wow.
It doesn't just speak, It listens. It is going to use Eris's own area of expertise directly against him.
That's so dark.
He thinks he's walking into the forest to study a linguistic anomaly, completely oblivious to the fact that the anomaly is actually waiting there to study him.
Okay, so fueled by this massive academic hubris, he puts together an expedition. 6 people.
Yep.
You got audio specialists, survival experts, researchers. But the most crucial addition to the team, in my opinion, is Lena Vale, the field biologist.
Oh, she's essential.
Because the contrast between Eris and Lena is just so stark right from the jump. I mean, the moment they step under the forest canopy, Lena's instincts are just firing on all cylinders.
She's the canary in the coal mine, essentially.
Exactly.
Lena represents this biological, instinctual counterpoint to Eris's very sterile academic viewpoint.
Right, she's feeling it, not just measuring it.
Yeah. Yes. Eris is staring down at his audio meters, looking for frequencies on a screen. But Lena is actually reading the ecosystem around them.
She's present.
And her biological training immediately tells her that the environment is wrong. The forest is way too quiet. The normal behavior of the local fauna is just absent.
Which is never a good sign in the woods.
Never. The forest literally feels watchful.
And I really want to talk about how the environment starts acting up, because the narrative kind of shifts away from a standard chronological walkthrough of their hike here, and it starts focusing on these completely bizarre environmental anomalies.
It does, yeah. It shifts the focus to the setting itself.
It really challenges our perception of reality right out of the gate. Like, they hear bird sounds, but they aren't normal calls and responses.
No, they're off.
The birds are repeating identically, like a looped audio track skipping over and over.
Like a broken record.
Exactly like that.
The environmental anomalies are the first indication that the physical space is compromised. The team observes branches creaking, right?
Yeah.
But not the random chaotic groan of wood stressing in the wind. The wood is creaking in distinct rhythmic patterns that actually mimic human speech cadences.
Wait, let me stop you right there, because physically, how does that even work?
It's wild, I know.
How does a physical tree branch make a human sound? Are we talking about magic here, or does the source material offer an actual mechanical explanation for this?
Well, the text actually implies a terrifying mechanical adaptation.
Okay.
It isn't magic. It's biology pushed to this grotesque extreme. The entity is manipulating the density of the wood, the flow of the sap, and the actual friction of the bark to mimic the function of human vocal cords.
You're kidding.
No, it's literally using the physical environment as a rudimentary acoustic instrument. It channels wind through these hollowed-out roots to create breath sounds. It's an entire ecosystem that has evolved to weaponize physics.
Okay, that makes it so much worse than just a ghost story.
Hmm.
And then the echo starts. So the team is just talking to each other, normal banter, and the fours whisper their own voices back to them.
Yeah, but it's not a normal echo.
No, the echo arrives slightly off. Like, the timing is wrong. And more disturbingly, the tone is completely wrong.
It's mismatched.
Right. You might say hello in just a calm, normal voice, and the echo comes back from the trees saying hello, but it sounds absolutely terrified or, like, furious.
Yeah,
It's
just
totally subverting the basic physics of sound.
And it creates this profound disorientation for the characters. I mean, human beings rely so heavily on the predictability of physics to navigate the world.
We take it for granted.
We do. We rely on the Doppler effect. We rely on the speed of sound. When an echo returns with an emotional inflection that you absolutely didn't provide, it signals to your brain that the environment is no longer just a passive reflector of sound.
Right, it's doing something with it.
It's an active participant.
Which leads us directly into the concept of the uncanny valley, because on the third night, they experience what you could call first contact.
Yeah, the gloves come off here.
The entity shifts from just mimicking the environment to actively targeting the team. They're at camp, it's pitch black out, and they hear a woman crying just outside the tree line.
Oh, the scene.
Lena Vale just freezes. Because out of nowhere, she recognizes the voice. It's her sister, a sister who drowned years ago.
Such a gut punch.
Just whispering softly in the dark, quote, "Lena, please help me."
You have half the team gripped by this instinctual biological urge to run into the dark and help an injured woman.
Because it sounds so real.
Right. And the other half of the team is just paralyzed by the sheer impossibility of what they're actually hearing. And then the crying just stops.
Just abruptly.
Instantly. There's no fade out. There's no sharp intake of breath. Just an abrupt digital halt, like an audio track being paused by a user.
And when it starts again, it sounds closer to the camp. But the source material notes this really distinct shift.
Yeah, the quality changes.
It sounds less human. The words sort of stretch unnaturally. The pitch wavers up and down. It sounds like something is actively learning how to use a human voice while it is literally speaking out loud.
Like it's practicing on the fly.
Exactly.
Right.
And at that exact moment, their camp audio equipment activates entirely on its own. The recorders start capturing dozens of overlapping voices, dead relatives, lost friends, just this massive cacophony of human chatter.
All at once.
And beneath it all, there's this one massive, incomprehensible underlying voice.
Right, a voice described in the text as too large to understand, the underlying frequency of the entity itself.
You know, it makes me think about the early days of like AI image generation or AI deepfake audio.
And that's a really good comparison.
Because we all remember looking at those images and feeling deeply unsettled. The AI would generate a human hand, but it would have like 6 or 7 fingers.
Or the teeth would just be a blurry mess.
Exactly. Or the eyes would be pointing in slightly different directions. It hits that uncanny valley. It has the raw data, like it knows what a finger is, it knows what an eye is, but it doesn't understand the soul of the subject.
It doesn't understand context.
Right. And the audio they're hearing feels exactly like a corrupted AI trying to generate a deepfake. The entity has the pitch, it has the specific vocabulary of Lena's sister, but it hasn't mastered the emotion behind it yet. It's just kind of throwing the audio out there to see what works, what gets a reaction.
That AI analogy perfectly illuminates the distinction between Lena's perspective and Eris's.
How so?
Well, Eris is still trying to decode the anomaly. He's looking for the glitch. But Lena recognizes it for what it actually is, the behavior of an apex predator.
She sees the threat.
She recognizes the stalking, she sees the isolation tactics, but there is a crucial, truly terrifying distinction in the text regarding its methodology here.
Okay, what is it?
The mimicry was not meant to lure prey, it was meant to replace them.
Wait, replace them, not just eat them.
Correct. The entity isn't using the voice of Lena's sister as bait to draw a meal into its jaws. It doesn't need physical sustenance in that traditional way.
Oh, wow.
It uses the sound as a calibration tool. It's provoking an emotional response from Lena, fear, recognition, deep grief, and then it uses her reaction to refine its own mimicry.
So it's learning from her fear.
It's essentially beta testing its auditory generation against a living, breathing subject.
It's beta testing their own doppelgangers.
Hmm.
That is horrifying. So it isn't just a monster in the woods. It is an alien intelligence gathering data.
Yes.
And the true horror of what it does with that data is revealed the very next morning, because we move from these auditory anomalies into what our outline calls the mechanics of erasure.
And this is where the story shifts from just atmospheric dread to pure existential terror.
The morning after the overlapping voices, one of the team members is just missing, gone.
Just vanished.
And they have survival experts on this team. These people know how to track. They know what a violent struggle looks like in the brush.
Yeah, they're pros.
But there is no broken brush. There are no footprints leading away from the camp. There is literally no blood. The only thing left behind are his boots, sitting perfectly empty next to a tree, but they're pointing in the wrong direction.
It completely defies physical logic, and Eris tries to impose his academic order on the situation.
Of course he does.
He tries to initiate standard search protocols, like let's fan out, let's look for clues. But then the team notices the first cognitive change. And this is really the pivot point where Eris's worldview begins to fracture permanently.
Nobody can remember the missing man's face.
Right.
Like, they all know someone is missing. They know they had a sixth team member yesterday. But when they try to actually visualize his face, there's just a blank spot in their minds.
And
A rapidly decaying memory. So naturally, they reach for external validation, like anyone would. They pull out their smartphones to look at pictures they took from earlier in the hike.
Yeah.
But the photos on their phones are distorted. The specific area of the photo where the missing man was standing is blurry. The pixels are literally corrupted.
And it extends to the audio equipment as well. They play back the baseline recordings they took on day one, and the missing man's voice has been entirely scrubbed from the tracks.
Like he was never there.
His historical footprint is being actively deleted in real time. This is the exact moment Lena realizes the scope of the threat, and she says, quote, "It's rewriting us."
I am really struggling with the mechanics of this. Like, I need you to explain this to me.
I try.
How does a physical forest, even an ancient supernatural one, actively edit a digital photo on an iPhone? Is the entity generating some kind of localized electromagnetic pulse that corrupts flash memory? Or is it something worse?
The source material leans heavily into the latter. It is much, much worse than an electromagnetic pulse.
Okay, I was afraid of that.
The entity isn't hacking the iPhone's hard drive. The photo on the phone is likely perfectly intact. The entity is hacking the human observer.
Wait, what?
It is emitting an influence, perhaps a cognitive frequency or biological spores, or an acoustic resonance that fundamentally alters the neurochemistry of the human brain.
So the phone is fine.
Exactly. When the team looks at the screen, their visual cortex simply refuses to render the man's face. The hardware of their own perception has been totally compromised. The blur is in their minds, not on the screen.
Oh, that makes my skin crawl. That is literal biological malware.
It really is.
If your own eyes are filtering out reality to match the entity's new narrative, you have zero defense against that. I mean, think about a traditional slasher movie, right?
Sure.
You go into the woods, a guy in a mask chases you, and he kills you with a machete. It's terrifying, sure, but it is a physical binary threat.
You can fight back.
Right. And if you die, you leave behind a body, you leave behind a legacy, your family mourns you, you existed.
You have a history.
But this entity operates entirely differently. It operates like a malicious digital virus overriding sectors on a hard drive. It doesn't just kill you on the present tense. It reaches backward in time and retroactively blinks the fact that you ever even lived.
And this brings us to a really profound philosophical question that the narrative forces you, the listener, to confront. What is a human being, really?
Yeah.
Are we merely our physical bodies occupying space in the present moment? Or are we, in actuality, the sum total of the memories held by others?
Oh, man.
Right. If no one remembers you, if all digital and analog evidence of your existence is completely scrubbed and your physical form is absorbed into the forest, did you ever exist at all?
It is the ultimate isolation. You aren't just dying, you are being unmade.
And observe how Eris's academic armor just completely shatters against this concept.
It has to.
A linguist can rationalize a strange sound in the woods. He can write off a creepy echo as a trick of the wind, but he absolutely cannot rationalize a gaping hole in his own cognitive memory.
You can't logic your way out of that.
Exactly. He cannot rationalize his own inability to perceive a photograph. The very foundation of his reality, his ability to observe, categorize, and define, is just disintegrating. The observer has become the manipulated variable.
So we have an entity that rewrites reality and literally erases people. But the obvious question is, how does it choose? Like, how does it target a specific person out of a group? And what is the mechanism it uses to execute this rewrite? It isn't just random. The forest doesn't just pick a name out of a hat.
No, it's very calculated.
The source material reveals that the entity exploits the single most powerful emotion that binds human memory together, which is grief.
Grief is the anchor. It is the heaviest emotional weight a human being can carry, and the entity understands this mechanism perfectly. It uses grief not merely as a lure, but as a crowbar to pry open the human psyche.
Let's look at how it deploys this tactic. Because that night, the forest drops the subtle mimicry. It stops whispering from a distance. It begins speaking openly, in full, coherent sentences, using an amalgamation of stolen voices.
Yes, escalating.
And Eris, the man who spent his entire life debunking myths, hears his dead mother.
Yeah.
But it isn't an echo this time. She sounds clear. She sounds like she's standing just beyond the fog line. She whispers, quote, "Eris, I waited for you."
It's heartbreaking.
And despite everything he has witnessed, despite the missing man, the blurred photos, the biological malware we just talked about, he follows the voice.
Because it highlights the overwhelming power of unresolved loss.
He just can't help it.
Eris is a man of pure logic, but grief is inherently illogical. It creates a massive vulnerability that completely bypasses all of his academic defenses. He cannot resist the pull of that reunion, even when he fundamentally knows the reunion is a trap.
He pushes deeper into the canopy, and the environment around him becomes impossibly dense, almost like anatomical. The narrative describes vines hanging down like arteries, the bark twisting like raw muscle fiber.
It's so visceral.
And there, buried beneath the roots of this massive tree, he doesn't find his mother. He finds a human jawbone.
And the jawbone is functional.
It's whispering. Hundreds of human teeth are just chattering together softly in the dirt, delivering a specific warning to Eris. Quote, "Don't let it remember you."
That phrase, "don't let it remember you," is the absolute central mechanic of the entity's survival strategy. To be remembered by the entity is to have your data essentially downloaded. If it logs your history, your emotional anchors, your grief, it can use that data to completely overwrite your existence.
Eris panics. He runs back to the camp. He needs his team. But when he bursts into the clearing, rambling about the jawbone and his dead mother, the team just stares at him in utter confusion.
They have no idea what he's talking about.
They don't understand why he's talking about his dead mother. Because according to their newly edited memories, Eris never even had a mother.
The erasure is spreading.
The entity didn't just mimic her voice to lure him. It reached into the minds of the entire expedition and deleted the concept of Eris's mother entirely.
The creature is scaling up its processing power. It is no longer just scrubbing the history of those it directly consumes. It's preemptively editing the histories of the survivors to isolate them further.
It's picking them off mentally.
Every time a dead voice is broadcast from the trees, the mental changes compound. The entity is actively feeding on their structural reality.
And this leads directly into the tragedy of Cole, which I think is easily the most horrific sequence in the entire narrative.
Oh, without a doubt.
The crew is on the verge of total psychological collapse. They're looking at the trees around them, and they realize the bark isn't just twisted wood anymore. They start seeing human faces literally shifting beneath the surface of the bark.
It's grotesque.
Dozens of faces, trapped, crying, silently mouthing prayers.
They're viewing the archival storage of the forest.
That's a great way to put it.
The physical remnants of previous victims embedded directly into the biological architecture.
One of these faces pushes outward violently from the trunk of a tree and manages to force out a warning. Quote, "Don't let it hear your memories."
Another warning.
But the warning comes way too late, because almost instantly, the canopy perfectly echoes the voice of the dead wife of a crew member named Cole. The voice is crystal clear, dropping right from the branches. Quote, "Cole, please come find me."
The entity targets Cole specifically because his grief is so accessible, it's an open wound for him.
Eris is screaming Cole. He is begging him not to listen, telling him to stay in the camp. Eris knows exactly what happens if you engage. But Cole is paralyzed. He is weeping.
He's gone already.
The voice comes again, softer, sounding so incredibly broken. "Please come find me." And Cole just breaks. He turns and runs full speed into the fog.
There is a line from the text that perfectly encapsulates this moment. It says, "Grief moved faster than fear."
Wow.
It is devastating because it's true. The human desire to alleviate the pain of a lost loved one completely overrides the fundamental instinct of self-preservation.
He vanishes into the mist. The team is just left in dead silence. And then, maybe 30 seconds later, the forest shatters the silence. It perfectly mimics Cole's scream.
A scream of absolute, unadulterated terror.
But it doesn't stop with the scream. Immediately after broadcasting his death, the forest plays Cole's voice again. Except this time, the voice is calm. It is placid. It even sounds like it's smiling.
Yeah.
And the stolen voice whispers out of the trees, quote, "I found her."
It is profoundly chilling. The entity is literally weaponizing the resolution of his grief to mock the survivors.
I want to ask you, and I really want anyone listening to think about this. Imagine you are standing in a dark, hostile environment. You're terrified. And suddenly, through the trees, you hear the exact voice of the person you miss the absolute most in this world, pleading for your help.
It's a heavy thought.
Could you honestly walk away? I think about network security. Think about a corporate server firewall. You can build the strongest firewall in the world. You can have Eris's ironclad logic. But if someone leaves an open port, a hacker can bypass all the security and walk right into the mainframe.
That's a great analogy.
Grief is an open port on the human network. It is the ultimate emotional vulnerability. The entity doesn't need to break down their doors. It uses love, it uses loss to make the victims voluntarily unlock the door and surrender themselves.
Your analogy of network security is incredibly apt here. The predatory brilliance of the entity is that it outsources the labor of the hunt to the victim's own psychology.
Right? It doesn't do the heavy lifting.
It doesn't need physical claws. It doesn't need venom. It uses the victim's own emotional attachments as the tether to drag them into the dark. Cole ran eagerly toward his own erasure.
Because the illusion of reunion was more powerful than the reality of survival.
Exactly. And look at the horrific synthesis of Cole's final moments. The entity broadcasts his scream of terror at the exact moment his physical form is compromised or absorbed, and then, without skipping a single beat, it proudly uses his stolen voice to announce its successful harvest. I found her!
It's just evil.
It is wearing his voice like a newly acquired trophy. It is a demonstration of pure dominance over the remaining crew.
It is sickening. It breaks their spirit entirely. And with the team's emotional defenses completely shattered, the entity no longer needs to hide at all. The physical environment itself drops the facade.
The illusion is over.
It stops pretending to be a normal forest, revealing its true, monstrous architecture. We enter what the outline calls the architecture of madness.
This is the point of no return. The physical rules of navigation evaporate entirely. Spatial reality becomes completely fluid.
The remaining team tries to flee at dawn. They pack their gear, they attempt to retrace their steps. But the pathways have literally changed overnight.
Physically shifted.
Trails that used to lead out to the river now loop endlessly back on themselves, depositing the team right back at their ruined camp. Their compasses are totally useless. The needles just spin in lazy circles.
The magnetic field is
Scrambled. And as they wander in these circles, they discover something hanging from the branches that is just bizarre. Hundreds of old cassette tapes, suspended by vines, swaying softly in the wind.
It's such a surreal image.
And every single tape is meticulously labeled with a human name. Thousands of names.
The visual of the cassette tapes is so striking. In an environment that is actively dissolving memory and history, these tapes represent a desperate, analog attempt by previous generations of victims to anchor their existence.
I have a question about that, actually.
Sure.
Why cassette tapes? Why not journals or carvings in the trees? Why is the forest adorned with audio cassettes specifically?
It ties back to the core mechanic of the entity, which is auditory processing. The entity consumes voices. Previous victims, realizing that their digital footprints were being erased and their physical memories were degrading, likely resorted to analog magnetic tape.
Okay, because it's physical.
Exactly. A cassette tape is physical media. It doesn't rely on a screen, and it doesn't rely on a network connection. It is a tangible vibration recorded directly onto iron oxide. It was their last desperate attempt to create a record that the biological malware couldn't just instantly overwrite.
But it didn't work.
Tragically, no. The tapes have just become ornaments for the entity, trophies.
Eris grabs one of these tapes. He puts it in his portable recorder and hits play. Immediately, a terrified man's voice screams through the tiny speaker. Quote, "It keeps us talking forever," and then a wave of static swallows the recording.
It's a warning from the past.
But the playback acts as a trigger, because the moment Eris plays that tape, every single tape hanging in the trees around them begins playing simultaneously.
Just a wall of sound.
A massive, localized forest of stolen voices crying out beneath the canopy.
It is an auditory nightmare. The entity's processing power is exponentially increasing. It's no longer just mimicking the past, it is actively processing the present in real time.
The trees themselves start repeating the team's current panicked conversations back to them perfectly, just seconds after they speak the words.
Like a live feed.
But then the echoes shift again. The trees begin answering questions that nobody even asked out loud.
Oh, man.
The forest is anticipating their thoughts. It has completely bypassed their spoken language and infiltrated their linguistic structure. It knows what they're going to say before they say it.
It's inside their heads.
And this is when the final erasure of Eris Thorne begins. Lena, the biologist, suddenly stops walking. Her eyes go completely unfocused, just staring blankly ahead, and she whispers softly, quote, "Who's Eris?"
The most terrifying 2 words Eris could possibly hear in that moment.
It's over for him.
The anchor has totally detached.
Slowly, the remaining crew members turn and look at him. But they look at him like they are staring at empty space. He is becoming invisible to them. The erasure is happening in real time right in front of us.
Yeah.
And as his team forgets him, the forest audibly catalogs him. The trees whisper around him, quote, "Eris Thorne, linguist, grief unresolved."
Like it's saving a file.
It is literally reading his metadata aloud as it saves him to his hard drive.
It is a systematic dismantling of his reality. Consider the progression here. First, he loses his mother all over again when the team forgets her existence.
Right.
Then he loses his team's memory of his leadership. Then he loses Lena's recognition. He is being methodically stripped of all external validation. To the world, he's ceasing to exist.
And then the environment delivers the final blow. The sky above the canopy opens up and it starts raining.
But not normal rain.
No,
Yeah.
It is thick, oily, black rain. The narrative describes it as almost sentient, clinging to whatever it touches. And wherever this black rain touches human skin, memories vanish instantly.
Just wiped clean.
We see one crew member look up into the rain, and within seconds, they lose the concept of language entirely. They collapse into the mud, just babbling meaningless guttural sounds. Another crew member forgets how to visually recognize human faces and starts screaming at her friends, viewing them as grotesque, unrecognizable monsters.
Let's analyze the black rain from a mechanical perspective for a second.
Please do.
If the forest is a biological server farm, the black rain acts as a full system format.
Like wiping a hard drive clean.
Exactly. It is a physical solvent for the human mind. It is melting down their complex cognitive structures, dissolving their higher reasoning, and breaking down their identities into raw, malleable material for the forest's root system to absorb. It is quite literally a factory reset of the human soul.
Eris is in a state of absolute panic. He is watching his team dissolve into mindless raw material. He frantically wraps his remaining tape recorders around his own body, desperately trying to preserve his identity the only way his academic mind knows how.
Through the recorded spoken word.
Exactly. He speaks continuously into the microphone as the black rain falls.
Yeah.
Quote, "My name is Dr. Eris Thorne. My mother's name was Elise. I exist."
He's pleading.
He is begging the universe to acknowledge his reality. He's trying to create his own analog anchor. But when he hits rewind and plays it back seconds later, his voice is gone.
It's empty.
The tape doesn't play his words. A deep, ancient voice replies from the spinning cassette. Quote, "Your memories belong to the canopy now."
It is the ultimate crushing defeat for a man who truly believed language could conquer any myth. His words have been confiscated. His syntax has been seized.
So what does this all mean? When I try to visualize this environment, the only thing that makes sense to me is that the forest has physically mutated into a grotesque, organic server farm.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
The branches are twisting together to form the architecture of a human nervous system. The vines dripping with whispering human teeth are like the server racks.
Right.
The entire ecosystem has been wired together to collect, store, and process human data. Those cassette tapes hanging in the wind, they were just early, primitive external hard drives that the forest has now fully absorbed into its biological cloud.
That conceptualization is highly accurate. It is an information processing system built entirely out of biological horror. It uses the physical flora as hardware to run the software of stolen human minds.
It's mind-blowing.
And this brings us to the ultimate staggering revelation of the text, because if it is a server farm, what is it actually processing? What is this colossal entity doing with all of this raw human data? Why does it want our memories?
This is where we see the entity fully revealed, the true mimicry of humanity. The canopy above them, dense and claustrophobic, finally splits apart.
A big reveal.
And hidden above the trees, stretching across miles and miles of the forest, is the creature itself. It isn't a beast walking on the ground.
No.
It is a colossal nervous system woven directly through the roots and the branches of the entire forest, embedded with endlessly whispering human skulls.
It isn't just in the forest. It is the forest. The ecosystem is the organism.
And at the very center of this impossible, miles-long mass, a gigantic human-like face slowly forms out of the shifting leaves, the vines, and the darkness.
Yeah.
It smiles down at them, using thousands of stolen human mouths embedded in its structure. And it speaks.
Yeah.
It uses every single dead voice it has ever consumed, combined into one massive, deafening sound, and it says, quote, "We remember being human."
We remember being human. That single line is the Rosetta Stone for the entire legend.
Colossal, root-like tendrils start lowering down from the canopy toward Eris and the remaining crew. But the text is very specific here, and it's so unsettling.
Yeah.
The tendrils don't end in spikes or jaws.
Right, it's not going to eat them.
They don't lower to stab or crush them. They lower to listen. They attach to copy,
To absorb.
to download.
And in this incredibly chilling finale, Eris Thorn falls backward into the mud under the black rain, trembling uncontrollably. He listens to the endless chorus of stolen voices echoing around him, just waiting for the end.
And suddenly, he hears his own voice. His own precise academic voice whispering softly from the trees above. Quote, "Who is Eris Thorn?"
The erasure is complete. His data has been successfully migrated to the server.
He looks down at his trembling hands in the mud, and he realizes he can no longer remember his own face. He cannot remember his childhood. He searches his mind for the name of his mother and finds nothing.
It's all gone.
He is completely empty. Imagine the sheer scale of a creature that spans miles, built entirely out of stolen lives and harvested grief. And there is this dark, twisted irony to the whole narrative.
Oh, absolutely.
Eris Thorn walked into the whole rainforest to study an anomaly. He wanted to categorize it and put it in a neat little box. But in the end, the forest studied him. It dissected his identity, dismantled his logic, and filed him away in its endless library of voices.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we finally understand the entity's true motivation. As the text explicitly states, the rainforest is trying to become us.
Which is just a wild concept.
It really is. This isn't just an apex predator looking for caloric energy. It is an ancient, perhaps entirely alien intelligence that is trying to construct a human soul through brute force data collection.
Brute forcing a soul. That is just, I mean, if it just collects enough data, it thinks it will spark consciousness.
Exactly. It's trying to understand humanity by consuming the artifacts of humanity. It operates under this flawed algorithmic logic that if it just hoards enough names, if it plays back enough stolen voices, and if it swallows enough human grief, it will magically cross a threshold and actually become human.
But that's not how it works.
No, it's a terrifying misunderstanding of what consciousness actually is. You cannot build a soul simply by stacking memories on top of each other like code.
Right.
But the entity doesn't know that. It lacks inherent empathy. So it just keeps harvesting, forever trying to complete a puzzle it doesn't even understand.
And the tragedy of Eris is absolute. The brilliant, arrogant linguist who hated myths is left as nothing more than an empty shell, a hollow echo of a person wandering in the mud. His entire identity, his academic history, his grief over his mother, it's all now owned by the very legend he thought was just a fairy tale. He didn't just lose his life, he lost his right to exist in human history.
He has become just another whispering tooth hanging from a vine, another bite of data in the biological cloud.
It is a phenomenal, terrifying journey. We've gone from a skeptical academic trying to debunk an old ghost story to a desperate man covered in tape recorders trying to prove he even exists, only to be entirely swallowed by an ecosystem that feeds on memory.
It's a story that really forces you to look at your own life differently.
And I think that is the perfect connection to make as we wrap this up. Because you, listening to this right now, consider how you process your own history.
Right.
We all take for granted that our memories are a permanent, untouchable record of who we are. We trust our external storage. We trust our digital photos in the cloud. We trust our audio recordings. We trust the minds of our loved ones to hold the pieces of our identity safe.
We assume it's locked in.
We assume our history is protected by the firewall of reality. But what if the natural world around you decided to repossess those pieces? What if the environment itself realized that your memories were a raw resource it wanted to consume to build its own identity?
It certainly makes you look at a quiet, ancient forest very differently. When you walk into the woods and it is perfectly silent,
Mm.
is it peaceful or is it just listening?
Exactly. Is it a sanctuary or is it a server farm waiting for an upload? I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over. Something that builds on this nightmare but goes beyond the text itself.
Okay, let's hear it.
If this colossal entity, this listener beneath the leaves, successfully continues its harvest over the centuries, if it absorbs enough memories, millions of voices, enough human history, and enough profound grief, does it eventually reach a critical mass where it actually inherits our capacity for empathy and love?
Oh, wow.
Does the data eventually spark a true soul, allowing it to finally understand the pain it's causing and become truly human? Or does it just remain a perfect psychopathic mirror, an immortal planet-sized reflection of humanity that knows all the words but possesses absolutely none of the humanity?
That is a chilling thought.
Think about that the next time you hear a voice call your name, especially if it sounds like someone you thought was gone forever. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.